Okay, good morning, everyone. This is the Economic Development Commission meeting of Thursday, March 6th. We're meeting here in the Old Town Hall Conference Room. We do have a quorum. This meeting is being recorded for those following online. Without further ado, I'll turn things over to you, Mr. Chair.
Welcome, and I guess call to order, and I guess first order of business is approve the meeting minutes from our previous, but two, right? Did we not approve the last meeting?
I think you did approve the last one because we had a quorum online. Everyone was online.
So motion to approve.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Justin. Okay.
Not surprisingly, that passed.
All right.
Wow.
So I know Jennifer has a commitment. She has to leave early. I want to just, if with your permission, reverse order and take up number 5. So we have time for a conversation there before we go back to the Community Development Block Grant program. So we had a conversation this past meeting with David Curris, who explained the Municipal Redevelopment Authority. I included in your packet and up on the screen sharing our current TOD overlay district. These are the parcels that are already approved or in our transit-oriented development plan and in our regs that are eligible for the overlay zoning designation, which includes much of the area around the Fairfield Black Rock train station. And it's my recommendation, I think, based on the consensus I heard, that we forward a positive recommendation to the RTM to consider joining the MRDA.
Absolutely.
So I didn't know if there was any conversation on that, but and I see Colin joining as well. So
good morning.
But I did want to open it up for further conversation. We had a Zoom meeting last time, everyone with the snow, but yeah, we had a good turnout. So
I thought it was get the head of the line sort of, and as they're getting things kicked off, it definitely dovetails with what we're trying to do. Hopefully it will help address some of the affordable housing issues that are persistent, to say the least.
Yeah, I don't see a downside to participation. It's really an opt-in program. So to the extent that which we want to engage with the state through the MRDA, it's available to us. It provides technical support and potentially financial resources to help solve some of our infrastructure challenges. And
there's nothing binding.
Nothing binding. Yeah, it's so I don't see as I said, a downside, but I did want to ask you guys and make sure that we're all kind of on board. And if you feel,
what would, I guess, next steps look like?
Well, next steps would be to send it to the RTM. I believe I've talked to Colin. Colin's on the RTM and has indicated his support and willingness to co-sponsor resolution, which is what we need. In order to join, the RTM would need to have a public hearing and then a vote to approve a resolution. So that would be the next step. But I think it's helpful to have the Economic Development Commission making a positive recommendation to consider participation. So that's
presumably we should probably present why we're for it. So
yeah, I can certainly put that in our referral notice for your approval. But anyone else
going to vote on it? Or
yeah, I would say I would entertain a motion to approve.
Second, all those in favor?
Okay.
All right.
I'm going to have Jennifer and Justin making the motion, and then everyone in favor. So well, that was quick. So now
very efficient this morning.
What's that?
We're very efficient this morning.
Very efficient. So let me just do this. Let me go to another thing we're going to talk about. I'll go back to. So I'll just go through this very briefly, but We are a recipient of federal dollars under the Community Development Block Grant Program. Let me see if I can get this to go. My finger is not moving very well. Hey,
Close.
close. Jeez, why is it not?
There's a command, it's like F5 or something along.
Yeah?
I don't know if that's the
Your
right-
mouse working?
No, that's the wrong
One of
one.
the
That's
wrong
not hooked up.
Uh-oh. I hate when that happens, when you make a mistake.
Well,
Yeah.
how about this? I'll just do this. So we receive federal dollars in the Community Development Block Grant Program. Every 5 years, we need to update our 5-year consolidated plan. I'm not sure you guys are aware of it, but you're part of our outreach and public participation process. So thank you very much. As I said, we do get federal dollars as an entitlement community, which means that we don't have to apply competitively as a small city. So we're large enough in population and in other needs to qualify. So this is a fairly flexible funding that's been offered here up to this point by the Department of Housing and Urban Development. It's been around for over 50 years, and we've received funding since pretty much the inception of the program. And the purpose is really to help communities provide both housings, decent housing stock, a suitable living environment, and expanded economic opportunities. There's a focus on folks at the lower end of the income spectrum, so persons are of low to moderate income. The consolidated plan is really just a 5-year plan. It's meant to identify priority housing and community development needs within the community. Part of that process is we have to do assessment of homeless population and other special needs populations. And the importance of this 5-year plan is it guides the allocation of those resources under the Community Development Block Grant Program for the next 5 years. So pretty much everything that we do for the next 5 years has to relate back to the needs that we identify as part of this planning process. Funding has been relatively stable, although the trend recently has been somewhat downward. We receive about $500,000 each year, and that's what we anticipate in the upcoming year, although those priorities are set by Washington, so we'll have to wait and see. Sorry. Eligible projects that are eligible for funding or activities eligible for funding, they do need to meet one of 3 national objectives. As I said, there's this test to show whether they then benefit persons or areas of low to moderate income. There's also 3 other objectives. One is to prevent or eliminate slums or blight. We don't have too much of that issue in Fairfield. And then meeting an urgent need. Typically that's after a natural or man-made disaster. It's a very limited category of funding. And there are some areas that are specific ineligible for
Just a
funding.
question on, are these self-imposed guidelines or these are the grant guidelines?
These are set by the federal government. Yeah, so
Is there a definition of what urgent need is?
it is defined in statutes and it's fairly limited. Yeah, so most of our activities meet category number 1. We have on occasion been able to demonstrate spot blight, but it's really pretty limited, which, you know, is pretty fortunate for us. We don't have that issue. So you'll be surprised. I was a little shocked by this. So we don't have areas of town that are majority low moderate income or impoverished, as you would imagine in Fairfield. So we're an exception community. That means that the federal government basically establishes the lowest or the highest quartile, and then below that, in terms of the low mod population, is what qualifies. So our percentage is 22.2%. So we have eligible census tract block groups in Fairfield. These meet the definition of area need. I'm a little surprised by this. It does change year to year. So we do this test annually. There are areas of town that traditionally have met this definition. They tend to be in the eastern part of town. That hasn't changed, and then we have areas, I presume, one in the middle there is maybe driven by Fairfield University potentially, because students, depending on how they file and record their information with the Census Bureau, could be domiciled here. But Greenfield Hill is a little surprising. So, maybe it meets the definition of people that are, house rich and cash poor. I don't know, because it doesn't take into account
Is
assets.
it possible like garage apartments or something like that?
Could be. I we just kind of go with the numbers.
What are those?
Or I'm terrible with maps and I can't see it very clearly. What's that bottom section on the map?
Yeah,
it's
it's
a
in the beach area.
That's the beach area? That's what I thought it was.
Yeah.
Yeah, that seems totally,
And again, I'm it's not the entirety of it, but it's a good swath of it. And again, maybe it's driven by, you've got a fair amount of rental stock there.
yeah.
That could be driving that. Again, it's a fairly low number. That number has trended downward. So at one point it was higher, it was closer to 30%. So again,
Yeah.
you look at it.
Rental stock that's paying $80,000 a year for rent.
Yeah. So, again, there's some things that you put in the algorithm and it spits it out and you're like, I don't know, but that's what the feds say. So we're going to go with it.
Okay.
We do a lot of our community development block grant funding is related to housing work. So we do have programs for home ownership assistance. We have programs for housing rehab. Again, these tend to be popular with elderly populations that meet the definition of, have a house, but maybe in assets, but don't have, maybe they're limited income. So we do have programs to provide no interest loans to help maintain the quality of our housing stock. We can also use dollars to acquire property and then do clearance and demolition work, which we've done in the past. We can use monies to improve parks and other facilities, again, so long as it meets that national objective of benefiting persons or areas of low to moderate income. Some of the other things you can do is, oops, I just skipped over, but you can use monies to do streets and sidewalk improvements in those areas. You can also eliminate barriers to accessibility for town buildings. So if you have buildings that, like this one, that are maybe not the most accessible to folks with disabilities, you can make those improvements. And then in economic development, we've used a very small portion of this to help provide small business grants, small micro enterprise grants. And there was a one-page flyer in your packet describing that program. And again, relates back to the national objective, either the owner of the business or a majority of the employees meet that low moderate income threshold test. And these are matching grants where we match dollar for dollar up to $5,000 as startup capital. We also provide a lot of funding to local nonprofits to provide public services here in Fairfield. And, the question I've posed in all these things is, what needs are you seeing, particularly as it relates to economic development? I think, again, we try to write the 5-year plan in such a way that it's fairly broad so that we're not limited in future years. If we see something that's slightly different, we can fold it back and relate it back to the priorities we identify now. But kind of this is an opportunity if you're hearing or seeing anything from either on the economic development front or anything else that you think we should include in the plan. That's why I'm having this conversation. We did ask for applications to be submitted by the 17th. These are typically the nonprofit world are interested in continuing funding for groups like Operation Hope and Mosaic Senior Services. So that deadline is the 17th, and then we go through a process of getting approvals through the various boards, and then finally submit our plan to HUD in August. So I'll pause if there's questions.
I'm assuming like the grant sits in your office and
It
oversees.
does. So we have one person whose job it is, she's funded through the grant. Her job is to maintain and we're acting as a fiduciary for these federal dollars. So we have to ensure that everything we do complies with federal regulations and statute. And then she oversees a number of the programs like the home ownership and single family rehab programs that I referenced earlier. So again, questions or comments on this?
I have a question. Can the grant money be applied to what we consider commercial blight that's outside those identified census tracts?
It can, provided that we can, again, it's a difficult test to meet the definition of spot blight. It can be done. I've done it once in my tenure here, but it's a really difficult process because, you know, the impression again is you don't have areas that are, you know, blighted in town. We're not an urban area where you typically see that. So it can be done, Kenny, but it's kind of limited. The other thing I would say is our dollars are limited. So it's $500,000, of which we allocate 20% towards program administration, which covers the salary and benefits of the person, 15% towards public service activities, and the rest, which is roughly $350,000 to everything else. And my cautionary tale for everyone that looks to use federal dollars for capital projects or things like what you're talking about is once you put $1 of federal money into a project, it becomes subject to all the rules governing use of federal dollars, including Davis-Bacon prevailing wage. And, you know, if you're not accustomed to using prevailing wage or union labor on the job, it can add 25 to 30% to your construction costs. So, you know, we typically, if people are okay with that because they have other funding sources, they're already having to do that, no problem. But a lot of projects, you know, what we can really inject into a project is about $50 or $60 or $70,000. So it's not a lot of dollars. And so you don't want to, if your project's $1 million and you're putting 50,000, you don't want to have to be governed by those rules unless you have to. So, any other questions? Okay. Well, thank you very much. I think, you know, we will continue to fund our micro enterprise, or at least make reference to our micro enterprise program. We don't get a lot of activity, maybe 1 or 2 businesses each year.
The threshold of 5,000 cannot change, or is that fixed?
We can move that needle up and down because and we have allowed applicants to reapply if they have something, you know, they can come back, and as long as they continue to be eligible, we've given, you know, on a couple of occasions a second tranche of money. So
I had a small follow-up question on the reading. Is it intended for those businesses to grow beyond the 5 to launch them, or is it sort of a support to continue doing business in?
it's meant to either start or expand an existing business. So typically what we see is a business has a capital requirement. You know, I want to buy a piece of equipment, and we've done those. So we've funded machinery, equipment specific to that business, and you know those can be $10,000, $20,000, and we'll basically reimburse them $5,000 for that if they're eligible under the grant. So that works very well as opposed to like operating capital.
Yeah.
We specifically don't want to do operating capital or debt retirement or funding, them to actually purchase a business. So those are things that we specifically, they're possibly eligible under federal regulations, but we specifically exclude them from our consideration.
Can I use an example? If somebody has, let's say, a landscaping business and they want to buy new equipment to expand their business.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah, and we've done a few of those.
okay.
Yeah, that's a very common one because a lot of landscapers, they don't have huge,
The headcount that's associated with this, that's funded by this, do they have any other responsibility?
the business.
I just mean like,
We have them sign a commitment that they're gonna be in town for 6 months beyond or a year beyond, but there's nothing really to hold them to that. It's like a promise, a commitment, but
they're, so they're hired with funds from the fund.
yep.
And then this whole thing they don't do anything additional work for the town.
No. But, at the end of 6 months, we ask them for a final report, how did you use the money, that type of thing, but it's fairly easy. Again, there's not a lot, part of the reason is it's $5,000. So we're not spending a lot of time on administration here. And again, the $5,000 was somewhat related to work effort. Once you get to bigger dollars, you can fund bigger dollars, but then there's an obligation from the regulations to be more, there's more paperwork associated with that with the feds. So we kind of set the threshold pretty low to
Avoid that. Okay.
avoid that. Because then you have to make like this cost benefit analysis and that type of thing. So,
Does the grant also require that there's someone hired dedicated to managing the funds?
No. Yeah, that would be kind of defeat the purpose, I think, so. But, some people do use it to, hire somebody. It's easier to document the equipment, honestly, so, and this could cover things like fit up costs, so if I'm, starting a business and I, lease a space and I need to renovate that space and that onus is on me as opposed to the landlord, we can cover, 50% of that cost up to 5,000.
This seems like a big chunk of like 100,000 of this 20% is going towards just one person for like.
Oh, I do that out of, I don't let her, she doesn't manage that piece. I mean, other than the reporting to the feds, the 20% for administration is the overall program, not specific to the micro enterprise program. Yeah, that would be a lot. So, okay. Anything else on this item? There was a couple other things I wanted to reference. I did include in your packet the economic development report. Thank you, Steve. Steve and I went to the RTM meeting and
I should have marked it all.
I felt bad because I put the slides together. So I hate when people put slides together and you're asked to talk from it without preparation. So, but I do appreciate Steve was there to answer questions and put a face to the commission. So that was helpful.
Moral support.
Which meeting was this? How was this the
Was
recent?
it the RTM meeting?
Last one or the one? Or
The last one, I suppose.
It was the February committee meeting, not the big meeting.
Not the big one.
Yeah. Yeah, we get it. We were able to get through the committee reports. And then we don't have to come back. So that was helpful. I also included in your packet the letter that we prepared on your behalf and submitted to the Planning and Zoning Commission on Post Road, 441 Post Road, the Circle Diner or Circle Inn redevelopment, which is currently pending for Planning and Zoning. The public hearing is commenced, and I think the applicant has completed their presentation, and we're now into public comment, and there's an intervener. So
Saw some of those comments.
stay tuned. The public hearing was continued. So since they're meeting weekly, we don't have to wait too long for the next hearing. And the only other thing I will mention is, as probably all of you know, we are asking the state to recognize a cultural district in downtown. We have a site visit planned for next Tuesday as part of their review of our application. Everything sounds pretty good, but we give them a walking tour of our proposed district and answer any questions they have on our application. And hopefully at the end of it, we'll hear good news, and there'll be an announcement, hopefully sometime May, June, depending on, I think, the governor's availability. So may have another visit by the governor sometime in the late spring. The other thing I'll mention too is we talked about the CPACE workshop. So, you know, Connecticut Green Bank has a financing mechanism that provides, you know, financing vehicle for commercial and nonprofit properties to help conservation, energy efficiency type projects. It can involve, you know, building envelope stuff like roof replacement, things of that nature as well. But we've done these every couple of years with Sustainable Fairfield, the group here in town. And so we're proposing to do another one. It's been 2 or 3 years since our last workshop. We'll do another one sometime in May. And Megan, we'll probably talk to you to see if we can use FTC. We did that last time, and I think it was well attended. So it's a morning meeting, but I'll check things with you guys.
Great.
Probably in May. And the only other thing I'll mention, because Beverly's not here, is we have they're hosting a Women in Business on the 18th of March, which is coming up real soon. So if you want to attend, Jennifer is one of our honorees being recognized as part of this awards reception. Cindy Bigelow is the guest speaker, presenter. So if you want tickets, contact the chamber, but I think that's it for Beverly's report as well. So I've covered a lot, and I know we wanted to leave some time to talk about, you know, underutilized town properties, which is Kenny and Steve, and I'll cue that up unless there's any questions on anything else that we just covered.
I'm gonna hop off. So I just wanted to say thanks for everyone.
Thank you, Jen. Good luck,
Right.
Jen.
Talk to you later.
She's up for an award, right?
Yeah. All right, so that's again. Now I'm having a little. All right. So I don't know if you guys want to jump in, but this is kind of where you guys, both Kenny and Steve, we've talked about 140
It is.
Mill Plain Road, which many of you know, it's a parking lot. It's
COVID testing station.
COVID testing station. It's right off the interstate. And, you know, between that and the downtown. But it's a, you know, certainly meets the definition of underutilized town property. So I think Kenny and Steve and I met a couple times and talked about like the goals. And I think this is, if I'm getting this wrong from you guys, this is kind of the two things I gleaned from what you guys put together. One is our purpose here is to leverage an underutilized town asset to meet community needs, which would include tax-based growth. And then, you know, this is an important gateway into our community. So maybe there's a better way to create a more aesthetically pleasing entry point into our downtown. So those are was there anything else that I missed there from?
We got a little ahead of ourselves just talking about like sort of a series of dominoes of what's, you know, trying to move things around with the Turner Center and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But Mark reined us in, just focus on what's possible and get this moving sort of forward. It is focusing on like as you brought up to us, the potential for moving the senior center and Parks and Rec over to the Turner Center on High Street.
Yeah.
It's probably part of the long-term plan, but we can't just jump into that there. So it is trying to take this one bite at a time.
So, yeah, I think you guys brought up so this is, it exists in context. We have a couple other town properties nearby. And I think Kenny's point was if you're able to package this together, you might attract a different type of developer, a more transformative project. And so, and a greater investment, which could offset some of the other, maybe perhaps address other community needs. But the primary focus would be on 140 Mill Plain Road. I think, to the extent to which we're reviewing this, we want to talk about other opportunities down the road. I think that would be appropriate. But just to give you a sense, the parking lot's almost 1.5 acres. The rec department site's almost 3 acres. And the train station itself, and this is on the north side or the southbound side of the station. There is both state property as well as town property. So the town's property is just over 5 acres. And, there's been conversation before as to, again, you have to meet the needs of the commuting public. So we need to provide parking, but do we need to have a surface parking lot? Is there a more efficient way to lay that out? Potentially, given that land is extraordinarily valuable here, selling for upwards of $2 million an acre, maybe it makes sense to compress the area that's available for commuter parking or provide structured parking, and then open up other portions of the site for future development. Maybe in combination with providing, that parking structure. So I guess to your point, we don't want to get too ahead of ourselves and head over our skis here, but I do think it's helpful to note that, there is an opportunity beyond the parking lot itself, potentially incorporate other properties that also may be under leveraged at this point down the road. So, and there is that conversation about, moving the rec department to the Turner Reserve Center, but that's kind of not in our
Sort of down the road,
as
well as the senior center.
Yep. Kenny, did I cover that, or do you have any other thoughts on this?
You did great. Thank you.
Moving ahead. So, again, from what we've talked about, and these are kind of the things I gleaned from you guys in terms of what our goals are, is, looking at the parking lot itself initially, it's, assess, define that opportunity. There's a land use analysis that we'd have to look at, but we're also trying to determine what the development potential or redevelopment potential of the site is. What constraints would limit future development? I can think of a few. One of the, when I looked at the mapping on this, these good portion of these sites are in the flood zone.
Great.
And you have an area that underpass there routinely floods. Plus it's limited in terms of queuing capacity, and that 5-legged intersection is one of the worst performing intersections in town. So there's a lot of issues that would have to be addressed, which is, to Kenny's point, you can have private development solve some of those issues for you, but it has to be a big enough opportunity to create that. So maybe the 1.5 acre site, is maybe not enough to resolve those issues, but there's certainly things we'll have to address or have a plan. And then we don't really have a process in place to look at these sites. And so I think we should be looking at, who needs to be involved in this conversation and what's the process look like if they decide to make it available for redevelopment. The town, I'm using the town generically, but what does that process look like? Ultimately, it involves groups like the RTM and others, but how do we get to that point?
Hey, Mark.
Hey, Colin.
I was gonna say we actually so in the January hearing portion of the RTM, um David Becker presented they have to present on an annual basis sort of the state of town leases
Yeah.
leases in the town. And I actually asked specifically about well there's a couple things that went on, and maybe it's good background just for us to know. I'm not sure if everyone knows,
Right.
but this parking lot that we're talking about, 140 Mill Plain, it is under the parking authority. They manage it.
Right.
But currently it is actually technically closed. So no one can park at this parking lot right now. So not only, I mean, we all know the train station isn't as full as it used to be, but it's definitely, I mean, I go in once or twice a week and it's definitely becoming more full than it was a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
But so it's not like it's necessarily a need right now, but even if they wanted to get revenue from this parking lot currently, they are opting not to. So that's one thing for us to just maybe poke out a little bit. But I did ask about this property, and David Becker did not give anything that was substantial in terms of ideas that they have, but he said that this is a high priority piece of land for the town to think about what they want to do. So obviously, I mean, like you said, there's a lot of different people and pieces in the town that would have to be part of this process. But it does sound like, I don't know if it's just him or the first selectman or whomever, but it sounds like there's some ideas that are percolating from the powers that be.
Well, I did mention this because I don't think, I think my vision here is that we would bring awareness to this opportunity and kind of help define it to some extent and show what's possible. But part of that, I didn't want to waste our time. So did have a conversation with the first selectman saying, would you be receptive to the Economic Development Commission doing something like this? And the answer I got was positive. So I think it would be worthwhile just to, whether it goes anywhere ultimately or not, I think it's good for us to periodically raise awareness around sites like this and say, we could do better, especially if it's, it's not even being used for its originally intended purpose. So
I take that as because we were concerned, like if the first selectman wasn't supportive of this, it didn't make sense to pursue it because it needed his support. With that, I guess that making sure it's appropriate for us to sort of champion this. And I guess the next steps would be hitting some of these, like the land use, and then making more direct recommendations.
yeah.
I guess, is it appropriate for us to continue, like whether it's presented to the RTM, or I guess who would make such a proposal, knowing the nuances of how something like that is done?
Well, I think this would be a report that I envision going to the Board of Selectmen and potentially the RTM at some point. Unless you guys have other thoughts on it. I mean, we can kind of maybe define that process, who our audience is, but I think I would start with those two groups.
Just asking Kenny, how would you package this to present to potential developers or investors?
Well, we have to figure out what the envelope to build is. Like, what is the full envelope someone could build as of right? And are there any opportunities to build even denser through any additional community benefits or purchase of air rights? Or that's what we really have to do also, is figure out what the size of the envelope is.
And I think we probably have a few steps before that. I mean, I suppose, and we had some conversation around this, you could go out to the marketplace and say, hey, give me your ideas, your thoughts on this. And the issue that I have with that is if the community hasn't come together and figured out what it wants there, you're kind of wasting other people's time. And so my thought is, I think we can certainly have those conversations informally with folks in the development community, realtors, mean, Kenny works in the real estate industry, but in order to define the development potential of the site. But I think ultimately what our goal here is to really package this up to the town boards and hopefully recommend a process by which we can bring other stakeholders together around a common vision for this site, and then go out to the marketplace once we've determined what it is, you know, if we want to do it and what it is we want to do on this site. You know, land use on this piece is a little complicated. You've got, I mean, it's in a residence A zone, but it abuts a commercial district. So you could easily see a potential zone change to a commercial designation, which would be a better fit, I think, than residential. And then you can see the other parcels that we talked about. They're largely in an industrial zone classification. You know, again, it's kind of a legacy to what was the land use prior to, you know, that the rec department was part of, before
DuPont.
Sports Specs was, what's that? DuPont, yeah. So anyway, this is kind of the analysis we'd have to do, is look at land use. What does land use, you know, what's the feasibility of changing the zone? You know, if it were to stay residence A, what could you do with it? And then I did look at, you know, flood zone. So again, that is a limiting factor, but it's just not that you can't do anything on it. It's just, you have to work around some of these issues.
Town owns Sportsplex properties?
We don't, we own that portion in front. So, you know, one group that would probably have interest in, if the rec department site were to become available, whether it was with this or with the parking lot across the way or not, or just separate or independently, I would guess Hal Fischel and that group would have some interest in it. But I'm sure there would be others. It's a pretty big piece of land. We currently do lease a portion of the parking lot to Sportsplex. They use it for their tenants. And then we have a lease for the, I'm not sure the contractual arrangement, but we have an arrangement in place for the solar panels as well.
Okay.
So, you know, those would, again, we're not talking anything that's going to happen overnight. It's really just, and again, our primary focus is on the empty parking lot.
I was told, I'm not sure if it's true or not, that the town has storage on the Sportsplex area. There's some warehouse or some.
Behind the rec department, there's a building that is storage. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah. And is that lease? I mean, what's the relationship?
It's actually town storage. So, you know, again, if that were, if that were not available, we'd have to find, you know, where's that stuff? We need to store it. Sometimes we store stuff we don't need to store, and if we
Bring it up.
need it, then we have to find
Local
local
property, then why not shift the storage to the Mill Plain property and use that location to develop something?
Yeah, you could, there's any number of possibilities. I just don't see anyone, you know, talking about it. So I think that's what I would hope, you know, this commission could do.
The biggest challenge with 140, as we talked about, is gonna be the traffic, the in and out, the parking, the neighbors are gonna complain about any development.
Yeah, you have a neighborhood behind,
That's gonna be
that's
a lot
be
of
sensitive to any development that, you know,
Yeah.
any change really, you know, people want to obviously understand the impact to their property.
That's what I was thinking, if we shifted the storage over there, I mean, that's gonna be minimal amount of disturbance. And then that storage property could then be developed.
Well, I think ultimately you'd probably just, you know, and again, flip this and at some point, if the rec department were to move to the Turner Reserve Center, then you have a piece, the entire piece that could be available, which is, you know, good size, 3 acres. Available for redevelopment, but you know, that we've been talking about the Turner Reserve Center and acquiring that property for 10 years, so.
I thought that was done.
Well, yeah, we have an approved redevelopment plan, but title hasn't passed from the federal government to the town. So when that does occur,
We could
then
actively plan.
then we can discuss, you know, the next step, but we don't actually own it yet, so it's still in conversation.
So it sounds like the next step is certainly at least the land use, and I don't know how that's executed, or like, do we have any departments that would provide that?
I think what I would lean on here, and Kenny knows this too, you know, you're assessing, you know, utility access, you know, what's the traffic look like? You know, has both positive and negative, and we can ask the regional planning agency to provide a lot of the, you know, I have some information available, and we can certainly bring in our town planner as part of this conversation, but MetroCog would also, the regional planning agency would be able to provide some base data for us. So hopefully by the next meeting, we would have that for your review.
Sounds like next steps.
Okay.
Moving positively forward.
All right.
Just randomly, would the Municipal Redevelopment Authority have any? Their interest would be housing, probably purely, right?
Well, you heard clearly one of their primary focus is to create additional housing around transit nodes. And certainly, you know, we've owned the area around Fairfield, Black Rock to allow for that, with some commercial development, mixed use. Yeah, there are opportunities in the downtown, and you can certainly envision that maybe one or several of these sites might be appropriate for some kind of mixed use development with some residential. But I thought, you know, the easier one right now is Fairfield Black Rock. And so that would be my suggestion with the RTM, is to focus initially on that. We can always expand to include the downtown area, but you really, you know, outside of these town parcels, opportunities are somewhat limited. Their redevelopment opportunities are infill, and they're kind of small sites. So I'm not sure there's as much to be gained there.
I think the ultimate one, like Kenny brought this up, that by getting packages together and you get the private investors to take care of the heavy lifting on some of the things, fixing that intersection and the gateway would be like the ultimate goal here.
I agree. So without, you know, either you're talking about a pretty significant investment of federal, state, and local dollars to do that. You've got a, you know, Amtrak Metro North using that rail, and that's one of the limiting things. Or, you know, it could be done in concert with a private development. But to point that Kenny raised earlier, you're probably not going to drive that level of investment with just a 1.5 acre site. If you had a pretty juicy, as you termed it, development opportunity, yeah, you might get private investment, private dollars to help solve some of the infrastructure challenges that you face there.
One step at a time.
One step at a time.
That's where we got ahead of ourselves and Mark Rain descent.
Anything else? Any other questions for you guys, or?
What's happening with the Porsche? Are the Porsche guys still going for it or what?
Yeah, it's still under appeal. We've been in conversations with our town attorney and their counsel and the Planning and Zoning Commission to see if we can work something out. You know, I think there's a lot of focus on the public access and the public improvements along the Mill River as potentially something they can do to enhance public access and some of the public improvements in place based on what was in their original plan. We'll go beyond that. But those conversations, I haven't heard any update, but you know, they appealed the decision. You know, those typically take a while to get calendared. So there's an opportunity for us to hopefully work something out in the meantime.
But they're continuing to go for it.
They are continuing to go for it. Yeah. Anything else? We've got other car dealerships. I mean, Gengris is moving ahead with their project. Look, it looks a little better now. Looks like a building.
What's gonna happen with what was SCAP, which I guess is Gengris now, the brick building across the street? Is that
Yeah, it's still on the market. They have a pretty high number on it. I don't see it being used as a car dealership, but so far, folks have kicked the tires, but nothing's materialized.
That could be transformational for that area there.
It could, again, where the market is right now, you would envision probably some type of residential or mixed use with residential. But we've got a lot of residential projects in the hopper right now, so we're not anxious to add more.
I did see that lot near the train station over like those empty lots. They announced the 18 units.
Yeah, that's
Kings Highway there.
been approved like 5 times already for different projects, one of which was 24 units. That's an 830G, and then there was a daycare commercial use that was approved for it, and then a mixed use. So they've had a few runs at it. Hopefully this is the one that
Seems like an ideal place for something like that, though. I mean,
What's that?
seems like an ideal place for, it's like dense housing there. I mean,
It's a very small site.
it is.
The issue that they run into is how to park it. And I know we're next to a train station, so there are some, you don't have to have as much parking because you're next to a train station, but we're not in an environment where people don't have cars because, you may not need your car to get from your house, where you're living, to your workplace, but then you need it for everything else. So in a suburban town, so that's why, they can't just totally eliminate parking. Although, I guess there's some movement afoot at the state level to eliminate parking minimums. There was a bill that was proposed. I don't think that's a great idea, but
What's on the 830G?
So we're very close to the 830G moratorium, right?
yeah, so it's pending. We'd expect the decision sometime in the next 30 days. I'm hoping soon.
Meanwhile,
Sure have enough applications, people trying to beat the clock, and we've got enough. If they all get built, we have enough for this moratorium and 2 more after it.
Really, that many applications? Oh,
We
boy.
have that many, units in the pipeline. Now, most of I would guess, if you look at the record, a lot of projects don't get built, or certainly don't get built as originally envisioned. So we don't want to get too over the moon here, but certainly I think we're in a good shape for not just this moratorium, but the subsequent one, because we have a lot actually in development. So the idea would be to try to have 9 years of relative peace and quiet on 830G front. That would be very helpful. Not that we shouldn't, or can't be doing housing, but at least then we're in the driver's seat. We can determine where and how best to do that.
many people forget about us. So these.
Well, maybe it's opportunity cost, and people move on to places that share the wealth or the pain, so to speak. So maybe they'll move on to other places.
Hey, Mark, out of curiosity, 801 Post Road,
Yeah,
what's going on there? I saw there's
it's
building
approved
going on.
it's approved for a restaurant use.
Oh, it
The
is.
original restaurant operator is no longer part of there was envisioned as this pizza takeout type thing. But my understanding is it's a different restaurant operator, local company that's looking to expand, local business looking to expand to that site.
Where's 801?
Where is 801?
801's right on the corner here, across from Sunny Days, across from
that
shopping center.
the gas
It's the gas station, yeah. So there's been a lot of inactivity on that site. And again, this is a site you wouldn't necessarily think of as being in a flood zone, but it is. And part of what they had to do was flood proof the building, because they wanted to keep the building. So they had to do some site improvements and other enhancements to the building. flood proof it so they could prepare it for redevelopment. So not an inexpensive proposition.
Speaking of gas stations that never seemed to, like the one across from Firestone,
Yeah.
that has been, that's like 3 years
I
longer.
reached out to them, but they didn't want to engage at all. So, yeah, it's strange. Some folks are, hard to.
I like to see some
figure out.
movement on that. What was that Sabi's car that had the fire?
That's moving ahead.
What's going in there?
Another similar use.
That's fine. Not that my
Yeah.
opinion matters, but
But it's good. Sometimes what happens with those fires is the insurance takes a while to settle out, so, but they're moving ahead. Slowly.
Let's talk about property on Jefferson. Was it on Jefferson? Or on,
Yeah.
yeah, right, as available as something to develop, right? Or not?
Well, there's the, around Sacred Heart's
Yeah.
West Campus.
Right.
There's, part of the POCD talks about creating another neighborhood, kind of development opportunity there, neighborhood district, if you will. There's the bus turnout area,
Right.
and then there's across on Jefferson, there's the
Whole parking.
commuter parking lot, which is state.
Oh, that's state.
It is, yeah, but again, are we using that as much? I mean, maybe there is, but that's,
motorcycle lessons
but-
there.
but you do have to,
Right, exactly.
but you do have to, with the state, you
Where are
have
they
to.
gonna go?
You have to go through a process for them to determine that it's access to the requirements. And because it's in the Merritt Parkway right away, they are, maybe not.
to hold on to it.
Yeah, they're more keen to hold on to that stuff.
Probably use it for staging for
Right.
stuff like that too, for construction.
Maintenance type activities, right? So anyway, something we have thought about it because, again, connecting the two campuses, making a better pedestrian connection between the two. And then is there some other commercial development opportunity that would complement, provide services to the surrounding neighborhood, but also complement the university use? You can certainly envision that. So the POCD is pointing in that direction, that there might be, something that was be neighborhood serving in terms of, again, a gateway into the community from Easton. Trumbull.
I know we're getting near time, just a random thought. I noticed that there's a lot more. There's a festival up in Newtown now on that property. That was the
Oh, yeah.
I just- state.
Mental hospital.
Yeah, I was trying to think. But and then I just saw today Westport is having some sort of a music festival, and I saw another one somewhere else, like a small town, but it's just interesting to bring people in and have that if there's more of an appetite for it.
So you're thinking of a music festival, that's Justin's
That was my
idea.
original thought a few years ago.
Yeah.
Bringing it here,
Norwalk had one last year.
but on a large scale. But, hey, it's a weather dependent location. We'd hate to have some major event scheduled and it rains, right?
It is when we do events, it's tough when you're doing outdoor events, because that's one thing you have to consider. How much do you want to put at risk? I mean, there are insurance policies for that, but yeah, oftentimes that's how much do I want to,
Right.
how much money do I want to invest in
It was
something?
a little different when I was in California and these events were going on.
Yeah.
I actually made it to both Sound on Sounds and the Sounds Head and survived all those.
Oh, it did rain, for this year, didn't it? Sound on Sound.
Now, they have not had good weather for anyone. And the last Sound on Sound was like that disastrous where they had to bring in tons of truckloads of chips and gravel and stuff.
We like to, work with partners like FTC to do stuff, and when we can, the Oktoberfest was
Dash inside.
give us the option of going inside, which we had to use the first year, so.
Well, we're just about out of time. Any other business?
So
Yeah, they're right.
did I mention this or not? Did I?
Yeah, Kyle left.
Colin left. Me and Colin are on the same page. I kind of made a little bit of a splash on nextdoor.com. I was wondering if I was getting in trouble for what I was saying on there about the red lights, the approval of the camera and red lights in
Yeah.
Fairfield. I did read the ordinance. And it doesn't say in the ordinance that it's only going to be used for schools. It allows it to be used everywhere in the town, wherever they want to use it. Even though initially it's only going to be used in some school areas. But I've experienced the red light cameras myself in California, in Los Angeles. Cost me a lot of money one time going through a yellow that turned red. And I went to fight it in court and they said, you're guilty, pay. Anyway, so, because it's a money grab.
Yeah, because you have private companies that are doing it.
Right. It's all about making money. I mean, this is not like a benefit. It's like it's a business. So once the door is open, and they've opened the door now, unfortunately, the RTM passed it and it's going to happen. That door will widen over time, especially since they're only going to be charging $50 for a violation. It's the cost associated with the company's cost associated with implementing this is going to be tremendous. And the follow through of ticketing and chasing down money and et cetera. There's a big process involved. People are going to complain, no doubt, when they are incorrectly. I mean, these cameras are not perfect. There are mistakes. People are going to complain. So, I mean, it becomes a big thing. And 16 states started this process and have eliminated it. Suffolk County just eliminated it. California and LA, they eliminated it because of the complications associated with it. So I'm not sure why this time it's going to be any better here in Fairfield. I realize we have a traffic issue. People are speeding and people are going through stop signs. I know, but that's not going to solve the problem having, you know, if you have 6 or 10 or even 20 locations in town. Okay, so those spots will be covered. But what about all the other spots where people are, you know,
Sitting up near the high school.
Right? So where really comes down to the police giving out tickets. And I know that's a whole nother issue altogether with the society today, with the danger associated with police pulling people over, et cetera, people claiming racism or whatever they might claim. So I know that's a big bugaboo for the police department. But anyway, now that they've cracked open the door with the camera lights, I read the ordinance, like I said, they can put them anywhere, not just schools. And I know that they're already applying to reduce that speed limit to 20 miles per hour. And it's like 10 or 12 other locations around town, besides the ones they've already got them implemented. So if you're going 31, you're going to get a ticket and you're not going to know about it till it comes in the mail. It's 10 mile. The 10-mile gap is what you're allowed to do. And after you have 10, it's an automatic ticket. But the more danger is when it's a red light making, going through red lights, not so much the speeding component, because people are going to be treacherous as they approach, when they know there's a camera there. This is what happens. Statistically, people will be not sure what to do when the light is turning yellow. They're going to be freaking out. Should I go through or should I stop? And what's going to happen is people are going to be nervous and they're going to jam on the brakes because they don't want to get caught going through the red light. And the person behind them is going to rear end them. And statistically, that's been shown to increase dramatically when these red lights are implemented. Red light cameras are implemented. The rear end rate goes up exponentially.
We'll have good statistics one way or the other to show the impact.
Yeah. So, you know, I know there's no points associated the way they're starting it out. There's no points on people's insurance for violation, but I have a feeling down the road, somehow that might slip in at some point.
Put in the door.
Once the door's open, and they've opened the door. So,
Certainly the company that manages these systems has a financial interest in increasing revenue. So, yeah.
all right. Anyway, I had over 1,000 hits on Nextdoor, and I posted up my
Well, it went through pretty quickly.
my argument
Yeah.
against it.
Sold me.
Yeah.
Motion to adjourn.
Yeah, so the next meeting, hopefully, early April, I'm gonna ask Jennifer if she would host, so her plan would be to have, campus a visit or at Fairfield U, maybe at their, new, building at 1720 Post Road in the spring, and then Sacred Heart in the fall, so that's kind of what we're try to, get
out in the world.
What's going on campus, and then if we have an opportunity to do other site visits, we'll do that too, so. But motion to adjourn would be appropriate.
Motion adjourned. All those in favor?
All right.
And we are adjourned at 9:35. Thank you all.